I'm Johnny Smith, this is Car Pervert, and this is the oddest Alfa Romeo you've ever seen that I last drove when I was 10 years old. Alright, look, to be clear, I haven't driven one of these when I was 10 years old, not in reality. But on a computer game, I drove it loads and crashed it and drove it really well. And that's because this, the Alfa SZ, the Sprint Zagato, was the cover car on one of my favourite computer games back in 89, 90. I was 10 years old and the Commodore Amiga was the best computer in the world to me. And this was the cover car in its glorious 16-bit. The irony is twofold. A, in 16-bit this car looks the same. And secondly, it's not even a supercar. And yet it was the cover car of Supercars 2, one of the coolest games amongst me and my mate. I've only had to wait, what, 30 years before I can actually drive a real Alfa Romeo SZ, possibly one of the rarest modern day Alfas you've ever seen. Should you meet your heroes? Should you meet your 16-bit heroes? It's so crazy, like sporty Lego. Let's take a closer look. Most of the Alfas I've ever driven have been handsome beasts, but pretty underwhelming to drive. This promises the opposite. This promises to be a really engaging drive. But I happen to think it's not ugly. I happen to think it's crazy good. Well, hello, Supercars 2 cover star. '89 to '91 they made this car. So this was me going from primary school to secondary school. There's wind noise coming from this window, the fuel pump is squealing from the footwell, and the fuel light's on despite the fact that it's showing 3/4 of fuel, and I know there's 3/4 of fuel in it. But it's an Italian 80s/early 90s feast. First thing I've noticed that I can't adjust the seat up or down. So being a tall bloke, I'm sitting very high. My head is just brushing this non-Targa looking non-Targa roof, and the driving position is that 80s Italian sports car thing of, look at the steering wheel in comparison to my legs. It's there when it should be over there, but the engine and the clutch and actually the gearbox is very nice. Come on, you little beauty. I mean, look how short its bum is. It's got hardly any overhang at the back whatsoever. In fact, it's such a short car that when Alfa designed it, they had to make sure that the gearbox was at the back, so it's got a transaxle 5-speed gearbox down there, not up there. Under there is the Busso, the engine, with its fake bonnet vents, but don't worry, there's nothing fake about what's under here. It's the heaviest bonnet I think I've ever picked up. It's ridiculous. Considering it's made out of composites, lightweight composites, there's nothing lightweight about that. The Busso engine, longitudinally mounted because it's rear wheel drive. So 3-litre V6, about 207 brake horsepower, car that weighs just over 1,200 kilos, 152 miles an hour top speed, I guess, if you're lucky. 0 to 62 in 7 seconds. 7 seconds doesn't sound very quick to me, given that this same era, something like an MG Maestro Turbo would have probably outgunned it. But that's maybe not the point. This is the Il Mostro, the Italian monster, designed on a Game Boy. Car that you never see on the road. When was the last time you saw one of these on the public road? Right, corner, let's do. The thing is, the car really tucks in, and the engine delivery, that power, it just sings. It's not fast, but there's definitely a feeling of like, whoa, we're driving a very, very composite-y car. I can feel the wind draft in this door. That'll be your 80s panel fitment. Yeah, you can probably hear some rattles and things. Look guys, it's an 80s Italian car with experimental composite panels made in a very small number with quality control that was meh. On a very dreary day in Oxfordshire, on one of the most potholey routes I've driven in recent time. This car came out of nowhere. Alfa Romeo in the 80s had been building okay cars, but nothing was super high performance. Then suddenly at the Geneva Motor Show in 1987, this thing just burst out, and it was called the ES30, the Experimental Sports Car 30, which stood for 3 litre. And that was the basis of the SZ. Why does it look like this? Well, one of the reasons we suspect it looks like this is because these were the early days of CAD, computer-aided design. Alfa Romeo, from nothing to production, did this car in 19 months, which was a record back then for development. Maybe the early days of CAD were, should we say, basic, you know, like Game Boy style. Now you might notice that the panel gaps, they're quite large on the SZ. I can easily fit 2 £1 coins in there. Might better fit 3. Hang on, let's see. Okay, now let's not be silly. Can't fit 3. Easily fit 2. 2 with a rattle. 2 with a rattle. But still, I like the car. I don't care about the panel gaps. I don't care about the fact that it's made like a cheap caravan. It's only available in red, and I don't even like red, but I still want one. When you see it out on the road like this with all the other daily modern traffic, it just looks like a spaceship, in the same way that a Citroen SM looks like a spaceship from the 70s. And when the Ford Sierra first came out in the early 80s, it was such a radical departure of all the 3 boxy stuff. This is not a computer game anymore, Johnny. This is not you at 10 playing an Amiga. This is you driving a proper rare groove Alfa Romeo. So if you damage this car, it's not like you can just game over, play again. It's give me your insurance details, and by the way, you can pretty much buy nothing for it. All right, come on, let's give it a little. Oh yeah, potholes. ...207 horsepower, which today is nothing. It's like average hot hatch territory. In fact, it's got the wide track and wide wheels. It's actually really good in corners. It's better than I thought it would be. And I like the way it looks. So I would have probably forgiven it for driving worse. I'm a tall bloke, right? And I'm telling you now, the driving position is very odd. But I don't really care when the engine's this creamy, because it is such a creamy. 16-inch wheels, they were big at the time in the late 80s. Split rim speed lines, and I love the fact that these are deeper dish at the back than the ones at the front. It emphasises that stockiness that the SZ has with this shoulder here. It's got a lovely kind of stocky shoulder, stubby little angry look, and then it just goes very abrupt. And then that thin rear light that goes all the way along, single tailpipe with just SZ, Sprint Zagato. Look, you've got this floating composite, bare composite spoiler. A lot of other cars have used this since. I think my Honda Insight had this. It's crackers. It's 2-seater only. All of that is just for luggage, contraband, whatever. And here's your boot. Nice and thin, space saver, yeah? If you have a puncture and you need to take that wheel off, that wheel won't fit in there because this is an Italian car. Why would that be practical? So that has to be wrapped in a special leather cover and go in there. Otherwise you just throw it to the side of the road and let the gypsies take it. And look at all this cutting edge composite. It looks like it was made really quickly at a caravan factory. Oh, and that's to do with the Koni hydraulically adjustable suspension system. So underneath this strange composite bodied, questionable looking beast is a steel skeleton chassis that's from a Group A Alfa 75 touring car. So this car has sports car roots, no doubt. It's shorter than a 75 because it's got such a tiny little bum. And when you get inside, you can see all kinds of strange joins. I never got to sit in one of these when I was 10. I just sat on a cheap 80s office chair playing my Amiga. You could order this in any colour you wanted as long as it was red with a grey roof with a tan interior. That was it. Oh, if you bought the RZ, the Roadster, which came after the SZ, you could get it in yellow, and there might be a black one or two kicking about. April 89. Autocar, Alfa SZ cover. Would you spend 35,000 quid on the world's ugliest car? After driving it, we would. Back when it was new, apparently drivers could pull up to 1.4G in corners because of the wider track and because of these Pirelli P0 tyres, which are 205s at the front, 225s at the back. So it just so happens that besides the fact that you're selling this car through your company, you've personally owned an SZ.
I have. I am
strange
afflicted.
man, you strange man.
I am afflicted. That autocar that you were brandishing earlier was mine, and I have to admit it, and I managed to pull it out of the records. And that was what, in the same way as you with your computer game, that's what got me going on these things. Always passionate about Alfas. When it first came out, we all said, you know what, that is so ugly. It's magnificent. My car that I had, the doors started falling off. Nothing. Stop that. You can't just gloss over that. It was a minor problem, but not. It was actually in the bonding of this Modar to the steel Alfa 75 frame. The problem was, and it's deep inside, and it's inside the door panel. And funnily enough, there aren't any experts on this because it's unique in its construction, and it took time and a lot of money. Thankfully, I bought mine before they rose, and the 10 months that the specialist had it for, it rose by about the same amount as the bill was. So I was very, very, very lucky, and then I could go roaring around in what is a remarkable thing.
At 35 grand, it was more than a Lotus Esprit Turbo and only a whisker less than a 911. You had to be committed to buy an SZ. But look at the damn thing. It's got 6 eyes. Really deep bumpers, which was like the thing to do in the late 80s, early 90s. The Alfa kind of shape here, but with no actual badge in it. The badge is just up here. You had to be really committed to want one of these SZs. You really had to understand its madness. Look at these swollen arches. There's a bit of Lancia Integrale going on here. There's a bit of Audi Quattro, because of course it was that kind of era. An era which is really, really, I'm fond of because I remember it as a kid when this kind of thing was new. It's a funny one. It doesn't feel that quick to start with, but then you realise it can put the power down around corners and it can really stay planted, I guess. That's because it's a wide track car. It's short, but it's wide. And don't be fooled by that. That says Zagato Milano. And of course it's an SZ and the Z stands for Zagato, but it wasn't designed by the crazy design house Zagato. It was designed in-house by a chap called Robert Opron, I think, under the design direction of Walter de Silva, who went on to design very cool Audis. It was made by Zagato. And if it had been designed by Zagato, it would have had a different looking roof, because all Zagatos have got the double bubble, as they call it. Nothing says 80s sports car like exposed screws on the door panels and what looks like office lino cut to shape. Actually looks like a bit of Lego. And then in here, in the door shuts, you can see all these composites where they've been kind of hastily bonded together. It's hilarious, but at the same time it's kind of cool. And the passenger seat has got an oh shit grab handle, I think they're called in the trade, right there. And then the dash, which curves around the driver. That, again, is raw, finished, maybe carbon fibre. I think it is carbon fibre. It looks like carbon fibre. And that is too, actually. I know what you're thinking. There's enough room here to put 2 seats. It could have been a 2+2, but the Italians were like, nah, don't want to carry anyone else. It's just 2 of us. So there you go. This is just a large luggage area with these attractive straps. Yeah, there's not a lot going on in here, but there's a lot of glass, and I like that. No blind spots back here. I want to say thank you to the guys at the market who have lent me this car just days before an auction ends to buy it, and that's why I'm not doing a particularly long drive on it today, because this has only done 20,000 kilometers from new, estimated value of 40 to 50,000 pounds. I remember when these were 15,000 pounds second hand. but I guess people are starting to realise how crazy this era won't be repeated. How many SZs come up for sale? They are a seldom seen car.
You don't get many of them coming out. I'd say in auction, public auction, there's probably about 5 or 6 every year. Obviously,
in the world?
I would say probably worldwide. They're definitely a worldwide market car.
Yeah.
Because it started off in Italy, obviously, but collectors the world over have these. This particular car has spent much of its life in Hong Kong, in, I believe, a very significant collection, which explains its low mileage. There's a couple of details we found that are not quite perfect with this particular car, but other than that, a lot of them, for instance, have got shrunk dashboards. These switches can be all worn and tired. A lot of these seats are really quite awful by this sort of age, but on this particular one, everything sort of seems spot on, and it's a proper investment grade car, I would say.
So this car's an early car, number 113 out of 1,036, I think, that were made in total of the hardtops. The SZ, the RZ was the Roadster, and that wasn't very successful. Had a shorter production run. Wasn't quite as cool in my view. I don't know what this car will sell for at auction, because the auction ends just before this video goes out, so we will put the finished price of this particular SZ up here now. What are the things to look for when you're buying one?
Well, it's mainly about this rather remarkable body. Apparently, if you leave one of these out in the frost, or maybe even under a damp cover, they go all pimply. Micro blisters everywhere, the paint is just gone. It then takes about 3 different goes in an oven to repaint one, and about £15,000. And I believe there is one person in Wales who can do it in Britain.
Oh my gosh, so specialists.
Look out for it. They're also, what you'll find is every single car is different. So in theory, it's a production car, but maybe their jigsaw blade was blunt, so they changed this design here. Who knows?
But you know, we're in the age of 3D printing. You could almost 3D print this damn body.
That would have probably got you better tolerances.
Yeah.
Both better tolerances and sharper corners.
It is, yeah, panel gap-tastic. But thank you for lending it to us.
And we thank the owner for that. That's a privilege and a pleasure.
Yeah. So the steering wheel is small and lovely. It's a Momo, very soft leather, and I like that. At low speed, the speedo needle is just doing that, as if to go, come on, go a bit quicker. You're cruising. And I probably will need, if I drove this car for more than 100 miles, I'd almost certainly need a hip replacement. But I just love the way this car looks. The presence it has on the road is special. It is the oddest shaped car, and I have to say, I'm really smitten by it. This was £15,000 more than a BMW M3 E30. And an E30 M3 would probably outgun it around corners and on the straights. But does that really matter sometimes? Classic cars are about the way they make you feel, a unique look, a snapshot of history, and I think this car is so exciting. Thank you ever so much for watching Car Pervert. I've had a lot of fun today. It reminds me of those hours and hours that I've wasted playing Commodore Amiga games back in the early 90s.